Hi everyone, this is Ashley with CTandRina Digitals. I'm going to show how to use my new ultra skinny backdrops in Photoshop, or ultra skinny canvas digital backdrops in Photoshop. I already have opened the images that I want to use. I'm going to go ahead and go to my quick selection tool over here. I'm going to go to select subject up at the top. And then I'm going to duplicate my background layer, create a layer mask, press Ctrl or Command I on my keyboard to invert the layer. And then I'm going to come over to my skinny drop and I'm going to select all, edit, copy, edit and paste into the image. I'm going to go ahead and resize. Actually, first I'm going to click up here to keep my proportions and resize. Now I made these really long as ultra skinnies because I want it, depending on how far away from the backdrop your subject is. She's pretty close on this one, so I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller and it's gonna cut some of it off, but I did that on purpose. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and place it about here. I think I can always adjust it later. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some adjustments to it before I even put it behind my subject. So first I'm going to flip it because the light is coming from this side on my backdrop. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a curves layer. Oops, that's levels. Curves layer, and I'm going to create a clipping mask by pressing this right here, and I'm just going to drag it down to make it darker. And then sometimes when you do that, it adds a little bit of saturation. I don't want that much saturation. So I'm going to go to my hue saturation layer and I'm going to desaturate that a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to merge my digital backdrop layer and the layers that I added to it. And then I'm going to clip it, which you can hold down Alt on your keyboard and click between the layers, or you can right click your backdrop layer and create clipping mask. And then it will put it behind your subject. So a couple things that I like to do to the canvases. We're going to add the shadow in a minute, but I don't want it to be like perfectly straight. Some of the ones I have in the pack kind of have a curve down at the bottom already, but I kind of want to make it look like it's not a straight canvas. So I'm just going to go up to Filter and Liquify. And then I'm just going to kind of give it a little bit of a wave in certain areas, just subtle. I want to make it look like it's kind of a thin canvas hanging down. So I don't want it to be perfectly straight, just very subtle. Press OK. And as you can see, that kind of just gave it a wave and made it look a little not as symmetric. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go down to my layer styles down here, and I'm going to add drop shadow. So you want this to, depends on how far away your subject is. Again, you can kind of see in my image that she's pretty close to the backdrop, so I don't want to add a ton of distance because you can already see in the image she's not standing a ways away. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring down the distance a little bit. And then you can play around with spread, how I usually have it all the way up, but when I do it closer, sometimes I like to bring it down a bit. And then keep it on multiply. This color is just going to be the color of you want it to match the color of your backdrop. So I'm actually going to grab a dark color over here on the backdrop itself and then press OK. And now you can play around with opacity too. I like to try to match the shadows that are coming off of her, but a little bit darker because hers are going to be a little bit more feathered out because she's standing a little bit further away from the backdrop. But since the skinny drop, I want to edit it very close to the backdrop it's hanging in front of, the shadow is going to be darker. So I'm just going to make it a little bit darker here. I think that's good. Press OK. And now you want to zoom in and click on your layer mask down here to clean up your edges. So I'm going to come in here with my brush at 100% opacity, and you're going to want, if you need to brush it off of her, you're going to want to use your black brush. So if you just have black and white selected over here, you can use X to toggle between them, which will make editing quicker for you. Go around. I'm not going to probably do this perfectly because I don't want to spend too much time on something you already know how to do. It's just a little time consuming. Can be a little time consuming. Just switching between my white and my black brush. White brushes the backdrop, digital backdrop on, and black brushes it off. Oop. Thought I got close in there. I didn't. It can be a little bit harder sometimes when the dress is kind of the same color. Sometimes I like to over brush and then switch back and brush back in to get those fine angles at places like that. It usually does a pretty good job on the hair, around the hair area. If you need to, like there's a little bit right here, I would just lower the opacity on my brush to about 30. And then I would use my white brush to just brush in the backdrop little by little. And that fixed it. Now with tulle. I use, again, a low opacity brush. I'm going to use a bigger brush because I want it to feather a little bit more, and then I'm going to do about 10%. And then just brush off the very edge just a little bit because you'd be able to see that backdrop through there, but not a ton. Even like right here, you'd be able to see it a bit. She was also on a dark backdrop, so I could darken backdrop a little bit more there, but I don't really want to do that. I'd rather just brush it off a little bit to make it work here. Okay. And now I still have some areas that I need to clean up here, but I'm going to leave that for now, just for tutorial's sake. It's the same exact thing that I just did all the way around here. So once you have them all cleaned up on there, you want to add in your shadow. Now, if your backdrop is about the same color and you need to add subtle shadow, you could just create a, you could use your mask too. You could just use a brush at about, you probably use like 15 or 20% opacity. Use your black brush to kind of brush off the digital backdrop and add that original shadow back in. But the problem that you can run into is if it doesn't match, see, it's adding a lot of gray to the purple because I didn't have a purple backdrop there to begin with. That, and also you're going to lose your texture. So I'm going to go over to my history here and I'm going to go back. I don't know how many times. Let's keep. Okay. So what I do is I just create a layer above the digital backdrop and clip it. You can right click and create that clipping mask again, or hold down Alt and click between the layers on multiply blending mode. And then use like a medium size brush here. I just want it to be big enough to add a significant shadow, but I don't want it to big enough to come over here too. I'm going to do about 20%. And then I'm going to hold down Alt on my keyboard and I'm going to click a dark area on the color of the digital over here, and then I'm going to brush in my shadow. If you need to get rid of it, you can just create that layer mask with your black brush. I put a little bit too much up here. I don't want that much. Come back over here and add in more of your shadow. Okay, and then it is behind her, so obviously I don't want it in focus as much as she is in focus. So I would add a little bit of blur, a filter blur, Gaussian blur, and I'd probably just add about 2 or 3. We'll just add 2. Zoom out, and you could play around some more with the shadows. If you wanted to make this side a little bit darker, you could do that. Or you could play around more with your adjustment layers. Now, if you do that, you will need to, I'll show you. So if I were to add a curve or a levels layer, say, and I wanted to make it the digital darker, it's also going to apply to my backdrop because I have it clipped to that. So before doing that, you're going to want to just unclip it. We'll just use this release clipping mask, and then add your levels or whatever layer you want to use. I'm just going to do levels again, and clip it to just your digital there. And then you would have to, oops, I just did it again. Merge those and then clip it behind your subject. I didn't really want to do that though. That was just showing what you would have to do if you wanted to add more layers. Try the best you can though to add all of it before clipping it behind your subject, because that helps. Clip it back. Okay, so before, I'm going to show the before, but I was playing around actually with a different, my purple textures from my shop. This is actually the picture that I'm delivering to her. So this was my before, and this is after using that. Now, if you want, I actually edited this one already, which I'm also going to add to her gallery, but I think it's really pretty if you add an extra texture to the smooth part here. So I also have one of my textures open from my seamless paper collection pack. I use it for every single session. You can find that in the shop as well. I'm just going to add this over there. I'm going to create a black and white layer just because I want it to be true black and white laying over because I'm using gray. So I want it to match. So I'm going to select all, edit and copy, edit and paste, and then I'm gonna flip it because the light is coming from the other side. I'm gonna resize it, and I'm gonna change to soft light blending mode. I'm going to lower the opacity. I'm going to do a curves layer, and I'm going to bring make it a little bit darker here. I'm going to go ahead and merge those layers and change it back. Every time you do an adjustment, it's going to change it back. And now I want it to come out at the floor here. This is a completely different tutorial, which is included in those, but you get it with this one. So my floor is creases about right here. Actually, it creases about like right here. And then I'm going to go up to Edit, Transform, and Perspective. Make sure this is unchecked up here to keep your proportions. And I'm just going to drag out the bottom. Okay. And I'm going to clip that to make that, sorry, I need to drag it down here so it's behind my canvas. And then I would do the same as I did up there, and I would go back to my mask here on my subject, and I would use about 10% opacity on white, and I would just brush off some of that tulle so I could see my floor through it, because that's what you would be able to see in real life. Added a little bit too much right there. Okay, and you can play around it with opacity on that. I'm going to bring it down some. I'm going to add a tiny bit of blur to that as well. And then see, it just added a lot more texture and depth to the image with that too. And that would be my final. Studio photographer, I would love for you to join my group on Facebook. It is linked in the listing description. One more thing. Sorry, I stopped recording and then I did another one. And I want to show you one more thing to help blend these. I just did this edit. I want to show you one more thing to help blend the top of these. So if this canvas would have been hanging, so this back canvas one is already a digital that I added. I have those in my shop too. Those are the fine art hanging canvases, but I'm adding this skinny to it just like I did over on this one. And I want to show a way to help make them a little bit more realistic, because as I finish this one, I'm looking at it and I'm like, well, like there wouldn't as be, like if this was actually laying in front of this a little bit, there would be a little bit less drop shadow up here than there would be down here. So once I was done, I flattened my image, and then I duplicated, which I'll just do it again, flattened my image, and then I duplicated my layer, and I grabbed my clone tool, and I came over here, and I just grabbed this part over here, and cloned out some of this. And you still want shadow, so don't go right up against it. Just get a little close and then drag that down. And then you can use your healing tool to kind of make that a little bit smoother. Actually, I'm going to do that again because I need to do it pulled back. I don't know why I zoomed in. I'm going to delete this layer again. Duplicate, grab my clone tool again, and I'm going to do it zoomed out because it helps to see how much I'm feathering it. So I'm going to grab over here again. Here we go. And I'm going to lower the opacity. So that was at 64% opacity for my brush. I'm sorry. And then I'm going to paint that in a little bit. Okay, and then you might have a little line right here, which is okay. You can just grab your healing tool and click over here and just fill that in. Don't get close to the shadow because it'll grab that shadow and pull it out. And just fill that in a little bit more. Okay, so now if I zoom out, see, as you can see, take it away and add it again, it looks a lot more realistic. I just did that to this image. Let's see if I do it to this one. Go ahead and make sure you duplicate that layer so that way if you don't like it, you can get rid of it. Or you can paint it back in. If you were to create a layer mask and use your black brush, you could paint it. Oh, my Photoshop is lagging. You could paint it back in little by little if you wanted to. So if I made my brush a little bit smaller, say I wanted it to come out a tiny bit more, I could just brush in a tiny bit more and feather it out a little bit more if I wanted to. So I'm going to try it on this one. I did it 64, 65. It's probably fine. Grab that and then paint over a little bit of that shadow. Use my healing tool. Get rid of that line right there. Blend it. And even that looks so much better. Looks so much more realistic as if it's hanging from the top, because two thin fabrics like this together, it wouldn't be, it may lay flat up against it, but adding that drop shadow to it that much, it tells the viewer of the photo that it's pulled out a little bit. And if it was pulled out a little bit, it would be closer if it were hanging on it up here than it would be down here, unless you had like two separate pulls. But I think this looks a lot better. So I just wanted to add that into the tutorial to show you guys.